Hi everyone, today I've got the wonderful Matt Witt with me. Matt, please could you introduce yourself and share how you were drawn to Avalon?
Hello, my name's Matt, and I run a project called To the Trees, taking people on guided tree walks around the Glastonbury countryside. I arrived in Avalon, or Glastonbury as I knew it to be then, in 2012. I was raised in Salisbury and spent a short amount of time in London setting up as a self-employed designer, and then decided that the city life was too much for me, and I'm a kind of country boy at heart. So a friend of mine had a spare room in Glastonbury, and I asked him if he wanted a lodger, and he said yes. And at that point I didn't really know much about Glastonbury, the town. I'd been to the festival for many years since a teenager, and had really enjoyed that, but hadn't really explored much of the town and the community here. Certainly didn't know what Glastonbury was, or what Avalon might have been at that period. So yes, that's how I arrived here, 2012. The first 6 months was difficult, but after that it was like the best thing I ever did, and I really love living here and engaging with the community, collaborating with Glastonbury.
So this year the Goddess Conference is based all around working with the Crone and the archetype of the Crone. What does the Crone archetype mean for you, and how do you work with the Crone in your spiritual practice?
Okay, this is a really good question. The Crone, to me, is an important figure that has gained more importance in my life really since I moved to Glastonbury. I knew a little bit about archetypes before I came here, but I think like one of the core teachings of having moved to Glastonbury was this introduction to archetypes, and particularly the trine of maid and mother Crone. Although splitting it into three like that is difficult, and the one that talks to me most is the Crone archetype. I respect this figure of the older woman, who's been through these processes of birthing, humans herself, but also of dying and rebirthing herself. And that to me is what most deeply connects me with the Crone archetype. This idea of feeling more comfortable with the processes that you go through in life that require you almost to let a part of you go. Drop a branch, if you like, even to the point that it might feel like you're completely deconstructing your life, but then being reassured by the presence of the Crone, that the new growth will return again in spring, right? That you'll be resurrected, as it were. If not resurrected, then slightly further developed in some way. That might be an illusion as well, I suppose. But that's what it's made me feel more comfortable with those periods in life where you're kind of in a bit of a gooey mess, waiting for the next form of you to take place. I think that's where I connect with the Crone most. In the past few years, I've lost all of my elders, so all of my grandparents have died over the last decade. And probably the loss of my grandmothers have been most significant to me. My life has, up until that point, had been pretty much void of close family deaths, or even the death of loved ones had been void from my life up until that point. So it was kind of like an 8-year concentrated lesson in loss, in mourning and all of that. And during that time, obviously, I've been in the process of moving to and living in Glastonbury as well. So they've kind of come hand in hand. Like it was almost Glastonbury introduced this archetype to me as that archetype was passing out. But in that passing out, I made the most important recognition is that my mother and my auntie are now in that stage of life, and I hadn't respected that at all. I'd been so consumed in my mother as being a mother, and hadn't recognised the perhaps sovereignty that she'd gained in having finished bringing up 3 children and stepping into her own life. And it really helped me to respect that. And now see her and my auntie as well as those role models, you know, those embodying the values of the crone. Yeah. An ongoing experience I had up until a few years ago was a recurring dream that featured the crone's face, or the presence of a witchy type old woman that scared the hell out of me. It really, the dreams were so intense and real and visceral, and the feelings of fear were so present and so strong compared to anything I'd felt in real life before. I'd never felt that kind of fear. And in some cases, you know, she would be right up in my face, like screaming before I woke up, and often I would wake up myself screaming my head off. My partner wondering what the hell's going on. And I have always had an interest in psychology, so I'm not one to kind of ignore dreams, and especially if there's a recurring dream, then I understand that is something that's coming to you that needs attention in your real life, that you're kind of missing, and it's through the dream that your attention is brought back to it, and with recurring dreams brought back to it again and again until you actually turn and face it. So in one dream that felt especially epic, I was walking down a street and it was just a normal street scene, but I could feel the presence of this hag or crone woman in the background hiding behind a car, and I could feel that same encroaching feeling of fear coming up from down below, the shroud of black kind of shrinking in like this, and I was like, right, almost half aware in my dream, said I have to turn and face this now. I have to turn and actually physically face it and see what happens. And in doing so, the crone was kind of disabled in a way. The light in the dream changed. Things turned golden, and I turned again, and she was sat on a wall over here. She didn't look at all like a horrible old woman. I approached her, and she transformed into my auntie, who's quite a jolly, plump lady, and she was sat there quite happily, and she's got a really positive vibe about her generally, my auntie. And I approached her, and she handed me this like golden scroll, half shawl, half scroll kind of thing, and in that moment the dream, you know, I disappeared into reality and didn't have the dream again. And it's still a bit of a mystery to me, but it's not difficult to kind of decipher what happened there. I think that there was possibly like a bit of an underlying fear of women generally in my life. Perhaps there was a lack of attention or lack of respect given to women, or women who had reached that elder stage. I think that in our society generally, possibly that's the case for both sexes. We've got, you know, elderly people kind of stacked up in care homes, and there's a lack of attention and a lack of respect given to that very powerful position that they hold. You know, we don't give them the opportunity to have. To contribute in a way, you know. So perhaps it was a slap round the face to do with that as well. But certainly it drew my attention to my mother and my auntie. And since then I've built stronger relationships with them. I see them more often. I speak to them more often. We write to each other, and that's something that I was almost neglecting in my 20s and possibly early 30s. So it might have been that the dream that helped me to build a better relationship with the mothers in my life, or the elders, you know, the elder women in my life. And it was a hell of an experience, like that dream, though, recurring over and over again and then just disappearing. It's very impactful.
Since moving to Avalon, do you find that there's specific spots or specific trees that the crone speaks to you through?
Yes, very much so. The obvious choice being grandmother lime on bushy coombe, right?
Oh,
this is an
she's
epic
one of my favourite
embodiment
trees.
of an epic embodiment of the crone in a natural, in tree form. And I don't think I'm alone in recognising the warmth and invitation that tree offers. The tree itself as a physical, standalone tree, but the species of lime in general has this feminine resonance, medicinal softness, heart-shaped leaves, these kind of things, that all add to that richness of grandmother lime. So I find the crone there for sure. Talking to other people on the walks, it's quite common to find the crone in the yew tree. Deep time, reflection and rebirth is what the yew is all about. So there's that there. The yews in Chalice Well particularly are often commented on for that. Although I know that the trees at the bottom are male trees. The yew's one of the trees that you have a tree with male flowers over there, tree with female flowers over there, and they need each other to reproduce, which isn't always the case because often you have male and female. A funny story about finding the crone perhaps in nature. So the crone is known to inhabit the elder tree. So the elder is protected by the elder mother in nature, and you're forbidden to take anything from the elder tree without consulting the elder mother or asking permission. And so you ask permission, depending on what your method is for doing that. I often find it's just a question, and if there's silence, then you'll go ahead. If something happens after you've asked that question, then it might be a no, and you should probably just move to the next tree and ask the question again. But there's a specific tree out on Stone Down, so over the crest past the Tor, coming down the other side towards Gogham na Gog. There's a field on the right with a lone oak that leans into the hill, the Avalon oak it's known as. And just past there's a stand, an old hawthorn and elder joined to it, also mistletoe. So there's this trio of interesting trees that are just standing there and that have been left by the farmer, probably because he feels that there's some, they're significant trees. He doesn't want to cut them down, or perhaps that he's got some underlying superstition about the elder tree and removing them. It's interesting to find these trees together. They often grow together, but in this case, the elder is kind of secondary to a multi-stemmed hawthorn. The elder, around most part of the main trunk, has lost its bark and it looks almost dead. But if you look up into the canopy, you can see that the elder is still coming out of the top, so that branch is still just about alive. But it's only alive because a thin layer of bark is protected by the hawthorn, and that's the hawthorn fulfilling its role as a protective tree. But this place is mischievous. I find it deeply. I'm often reluctant to approach the trees. When my grandfather died, so in December 2019, I went to the tree. It was at winter solstice. And I went out there to make an offering to the tree. I took out an orange. He liked oranges. He liked mince pies, and I took a staff as well and left them as an offering for him next to this tree, because I felt this tree seemed like a powerful spot for that kind of work. So I walked up to the tree, and because the sheep like to rub themselves on the tree, there's mud all around, and it's late evening, dark winter, it's grey, you can't, it's that mood, and left the bits, stood back and just sort of closed my eyes and said what needed to be said. And before I could finish, where no spaniel was before, a spaniel darted in past me, grabbed the mince pie, ran off with it, and in my haste to kind of go no, I slipped and ended up in the mud. Looked around and there's no humans to be looking out for the spaniel, and off the spaniel goes with the mince pie. And my initial reaction is, oh man, you just eaten my offering. And it stood there for a minute or so. So suddenly 2 people appear over the horizon and they're like, have you seen our dog? And I was like, it went that way. And in that moment I was like, no, it's not made off with my offering. That was like an acceptance of an offering. That was like the symbolic kind of, yes, okay, there you go. Your offering has been passed on to your grandfather. And I found that a lovely experience, and although not directly related to the crone, still with the reference to my granddad, and with the elder tree present. So definitely with the elder mother present, who looks after the elder tree. And that's a story that I tell to people when I take walks out there and people seem to really connect with that story. Very personal and funny at the same time. I think there can almost be like a stuffiness in ceremony sometimes that agitates me a little bit, and maybe I was taking that part of the ceremony too seriously, and it was kind of nature's way or the universe's way of sort of saying, lighten up, it's only a passing, there's more to come, and they're here with you now. And like I haven't felt the presence of my grandparents more than in any part of my life than after they died. And I don't know whether that's common for people who've lost people generally, but that's how it felt for me. I feel like they're allies, and although not physically present, they're present in the lessons that they taught me throughout their life.
And they're always with you in your heart.
Yeah.
It's probably not insignificant that this is the first interview that I'm doing for the Crone, so thank you for being the first interview this year.
My pleasure.
This morning I got a voice note from my best friend back home in Nairobi, full of tears, just like it's been 6 years since her grandmother passed away. They were incredibly close, and she went, I've just had the realisation that it's been 6 years today, and I have an oracle card deck that's called Talking to Heaven. She went, I know you have those cards. Could you please pull me a message from my grandma? And I went to shuffle the cards. This was half an hour before I came to do the interview with you, and the messages that came out were, don't be afraid. I'm learning over here, and I've become one of your guides now.
Amazing. That's beautiful.
And, they are always with you. And part of, I was typing out the messages to her, and part of what the message said was, I'm actually more present with you now than I was when I was alive, because I can be fully focused on being with you.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And so maybe
that resonates very much. So yeah, thanks, Ria.
Maybe part of that message was for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
On behalf of everyone that listens to this interview, Matt, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ria.
Thank you for sharing with us. And see you in the new year.
And see you. Bye.